Welcome to Study Smart, the weekly show for wine students who want to take their wine education to the next level. I'm your host, Gill Gordon Smith, and in this episode we're breaking down another important wine region. With exam strategies and techniques to help you reach the next level in your wine education, this is Study Smart. Welcome back. Today we're heading to Burgundy, and for many students, Burgundy is one of the most challenging regions in the WSET Level 3 syllabus. There are hundreds of vineyard names, hundreds of producers, a complex classification system, and some of the world's most expensive wines. But Burgundy becomes much easier when you stop trying to memorize names and start understanding the pattern, because Burgundy is built around one simple idea: place matters, more than anywhere else in the wine world. One reason Burgundy can feel so different from Bordeaux is that Burgundy is largely a place-based wine region. In Bordeaux, we often start with the chateau. In Burgundy, we often start with the place. Meursault, Gevrey-Chambertin, Puligny-Montrachet, Chablis. These place names tell us where the wine comes from and often provide clues about style and quality. So understanding Burgundy means understanding the geography. A useful way to think about Burgundy is as a pyramid. At the base sit the regional wines, so most commonly Bourgogne AOC, and above that are the village or commune wines, for example, Chablis, Meursault, Volnay, Gevrey-Chambertin. Next come the Premier Cru vineyards, and these are superior sites within a village. There's over 600 of these. And finally, the Grand Cru vineyards. These are the most prestigious vineyard sites in Burgundy, and there are 33. Unlike Bordeaux, Burgundy's hierarchy is closely linked to place. So at this point, Burgundy can start to sound a little overwhelming, and to be fair, it is one of the most detailed wine regions in the world. And it is, but remember, at WSET Level 3, we're not asking you to memorize every appellation. What we want you to understand is the hierarchy. Regional wines, village wines, Premier Cru vineyards, and Grand Cru vineyards. Understand the system first, and the names become much easier to learn afterwards. Burgundy stretches from Chablis in the north through the Côte de Nuits, the Côte de Beaune, the Côte Chalonnais, and the Mâconnais. And as you move south, temperatures gradually increase. So northern Burgundy is cooler, southern Burgundy is warmer. And this simple north to south progression helps explain many of the differences between the wines. Burgundy has a continental climate, and that means cold winters, warm summers, and significant vintage variation. One of the biggest hazards is spring frost. And Chardonnay and Pinot Noir bud relatively early, so a frost event can damage young shoots and significantly reduce yields. Hail is another important hazard to think about, because summer storms can damage grapes and vineyard canopies, reducing both yield and quality. One of the most important concepts to remember from Burgundy would be that mid-slopes matter. The finest vineyards are usually planted halfway up a slope, and that's because valley floors collect cold air and are more vulnerable to frost. Higher slopes can be cooler and more exposed, so mid-slopes provide the ideal combination of sunlight, drainage, airflow, and frost protection. This explains a huge amount about Burgundy. The dominant soils in Burgundy are limestone and clay, and for WSET students, the important question is not simply what the soils are, it's what they do. Limestone contributes drainage, freshness, and acidity retention. Clay contributes body, richness, and texture. And the balance between these soils varies from vineyard to vineyard, and that helps explain why neighbouring vineyards can produce such different wine styles. Although many grape varieties exist in Burgundy, two dominate: Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and both are highly responsive to site. In Burgundy, where a grape is grown is just as important as the grape itself. So let's begin to decipher Chablis. Chablis sits in northern Burgundy, and in fact, it's geographically closer to Champagne than it is to the Côte d'Or. This northern location creates a cooler growing environment. Because temperatures are cooler, Chardonnay ripens more slowly. So as a result, Chablis typically shows higher acidity, citrus fruit, green apple characters, lower alcohol, and a leaner body. So think about freshness rather than richness. One of the greatest challenges in Chablis is spring frost. Because Chardonnay buds early, frost can significantly reduce yields, so growers may use heaters, wind machines, sprinklers to help protect the vines. This is a classic example of a climatic hazard and the strategies that can be used to reduce its impact. The most famous soil in Chablis is Kimmeridgian limestone. And the question here is, what effect does that have? It contributes drainage, freshness, acidity retention, and precision. So we're focusing here on the impact rather than simply the terminology. A useful way to remember Chablis is to think of it as a ladder. At the base is Petit Chablis, then Premier Cru, and then Grand Cru. As site quality improves, we generally see better exposure, more reliable ripening, greater concentration, and greater aging potential. The Grand Cru vineyards occupy one famous southwest-facing hillside overlooking the Seine River. This position provides excellent exposure and consistent ripening. Because Chablis naturally has high acidity and delicate fruit, winemaking is usually quite restrained, so the use of stainless steel is common. Some producers use older oak, lees aging, and malolactic conversion to add texture while preserving freshness, but the aim is usually balance rather than obvious oak character. It can be useful to compare Chablis with Chardonnay from the Côte de Beaune. Chablis is generally leaner, higher in acidity, and less influenced by oak. Côte de Beaune Chardonnay is generally richer, broader, and more textural. So we're looking at the same grape in a different place with a different result, and that's Burgundy. For WSET Level 3, it's important to explain and understand why frost is a major hazard, why slope position matters, why limestone matters, and why Chablis differs from warmer Chardonnay regions. The strongest answers always connect climate, slope, soil, ripening, and wine style. So don't simply describe, explain. So there are 4 key ideas from today's episode to take away. Burgundy is built around place. Mid-slopes are usually the best vineyard sites. Limestone and clay influence wine style, and Chablis is one of the world's clearest examples of cool climate Chardonnay. If you understand those ideas, Burgundy becomes much easier to navigate. Next time, we'll head into the Côte d'Or and explore the villages and vineyards that made Burgundy famous. Now, most learners think I should finish one topic completely before moving on to another, and learning science says not always. So here, we're going to talk about mixing it up, why switching topics can help you learn better. So far we've explored retrieval, forgetting, focus, and why cramming often lets us down. So today we're tackling another study myth. Studying one topic for hours is not always the smartest way to learn. So sometimes mixing topics helps your brain learn better. Now that sounds completely backwards, because surely focusing on one thing until you master it makes sense. Well, not always, and here's why. When you study the same topic over and over in one sitting, your brain starts to get comfortable. Patterns feel familiar and answers become predictable, and that can create the illusion that learning is happening. You're just getting good at recognizing the same thing repeatedly. So learning scientists call the alternative interleaving. It's a fancy word for mixing things up. So instead of doing one long block of one subject, you rotate. So for example, topic A, then topic B, then topic C, then back again. And this helps because your brain learns by comparison. It gets stronger when it has to ask, how is this different? Or which concept applies here? Or why is this answer different from the last one? And that kind of thinking builds stronger understanding. So let's bust a myth. The myth is, if study feels smooth and easy, I must be learning well. Not necessarily. Easy often means familiar, but challenge builds stronger learning. So think about learning faces. If you saw one person's face 50 times in a row, then switch to another, it would feel easier. But if you had to identify different faces mixed together, that's harder, and that harder process often leads to better recognition later. Learning works similarly. So here's your experiment for this week. Instead of studying one topic for 2 hours, try mixing 3 shorter blocks. Start with 30 minutes of one topic and then switch. Go to 30 minutes of something different, then switch again. Then later come back to the first topic. The key is choosing related material where comparison matters. Not total chaos, we're mixing thoughtfully and not creating confusion. So here's your reflection challenge. Did my study feel easy because I understood it, or because I kept repeating the same pattern? Because better learning is not always the smoothest learning. Sometimes your brain gets stronger when it has to switch gears. So see you next week for another region and another Study Smarter tip. Thank you for listening to Study Smart. If you're ready to take your wine education to the next level, why not visit the Italian Wine Academy, at italianwineacademy.org. Don't forget to tune in next week when we'll be exploring another important wine region. Until then, chin chin with the Italian wine people.